Hi, and welcome back to Continual. Tonight, we're going to take everyone on a little trip through the doorway as we dive in to talk about our favorite episodes from, you might have guessed it, Rod Serling and the Twilight Zone. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and let's go around and see who else is getting ready to go dive into that space between spaces. Len, you're up first.
Hi, I'm Len Berry, the writer of Ethereal Darkness. I write such wonderful things like Loyalty of Severus and epic science fiction, all the way to dark fantasy called Scars of Shadow. I like the fact that I have diverse tastes, and that kind of reflects a little bit the influence of Rod Serling on me. Because you want to talk about somebody who had diverse tastes.
Mm-hmm. Kiernan?
I'm Kiernan Kelly. I write GLBTQ plus romance. I also write some horror, and I write YA under Dakota Chase.
Misty?
I'm Misty Massey. I'm the author of the Mad Kestrel series of pirate fantasy adventures, and I grew up on the Twilight Zone, so I'm really excited to talk about it.
Fraser?
I'm Fraser Sherman. I write primarily historical fantasy and also film reference books, and I have covered some of the Twilight Zone episodes in a couple of my books.
So Twilight Zone was and has always been one of my favorite shows. I remember being a kid, I would watch it whatever time it came on. Now, for me, obviously, it was repeats. Yeah, for Len, I know you probably caught it all in the first runs, but yeah.
Brand new.
I caught all of them in reruns, and you watch them over and over again. And a lot of the time, these were on in the middle of the night, all this kind of good stuff. And as we've seen networks like Sci-Fi and others come up and they do film fests and marathons with them, but we really only get to see a subset of those episodes. You really got to own the set or go looking for them to get a lot of your favorite episodes. But, I think all of us here, you can't help but fall under the influence of Rod Serling as a storyteller. And even though he didn't write all of them, he wrote a lot of them. And of some of the others, I mean, some of the most fundamental writers in science fiction and fantasy and horror wrote for the Twilight Zone at some point. But Rod Serling, was that consummate real storyteller. And so much of it was about processing out his experiences from the war and the societal change that was going on at the time, everything that was happening. So I want to start with Len. What is your first memory of the Twilight Zone?
My first memory of the Twilight Zone, I think, really comes from 5 people in search of an exit. It's 5 very disparate characters. They're in a really strange, round, open chamber. They don't know how they got there, and they definitely want to leave. And it's terrifying, the stark bleakness of it. And the twist on the end actually makes you kind of feel like, crazy shift of perception. But then Serling's monologue comes in at the end and actually says, hey, now that you have a reason to hope. That, and he's always standing there with a cigarette. But that one has to be the first one that pops in my mind. Those 5 trying to get out of that big tube.
That's a good classic one. How about you, Kiernan?
My first one that I can remember watching, and I also watched them all in reruns, was To Serve Man, which remains one of my favorites. The twist is just great. I mean, if it were made today, it wouldn't be so great. But because it was made when it was made, it was phenomenal. And I absolutely adore that episode.
Well, I think we keep seeing them try to remake that one, but nobody's quite gotten to that same level of punchline again. All right, Misty, what about you? What's the first one you really remember?
So when I was little, I wasn't actually allowed to stay up that late, and because Twilight Zone came on at like 11:30 when I was trying to watch it, and I wasn't allowed to stay up that late. But I had a cousin who was 5 years older than me, and she spent every summer with us. And so she would and she was allowed to stay up that late. My parents would go on to bed. And so as soon as my parents were in bed, she would sneak in and get me out of bed and then bring me in the TV room, and we would watch Twilight Zone together. And the first one that I remember us watching together was Little Girl Lost, which is the one where the little girl, the child falls out of bed, rolls under the bed and into an extra dimensional space, and the parents can hear her crying and they can't find her, and they have to go in and get her out before it closes. And it scared the absolute bedoodles out of me for a long time, because that liminal space under your bed is already scary just by virtue of being. But then to tell me, oh, I can roll under the bed and then disappear. Yay, that's fun. So I had nightmares about that one.
Fraser, how about you?
I didn't get to watch Twilight Zone until after my family moved to the US in the 70s. The first one I can remember, which we talked about on the Movies That Scared Us panel, was The Howling Man. It's not a great one, but it was memorable. A man explaining why somebody locked up in his closet is screaming tells a story about how he visited an isolated monastery where they claim to have trapped the devil, which is why the world is at relative peace. And then eventually the devil, no, they're crazy. I'm just an ordinary person. Please help me. And eventually the guy let him out. And then, of course, it turns out it is the devil, and you get to watch him transform as he walks before he finally disappears. Based on a Richard Matheson short story, I'm not sure if he did the script. It's not one of their best, but it was a really striking one as my first encounter.
But really, even not so good Twilight Zone is still better than a lot of what you get these days.
Absolutely. I mean, I will watch every single episode. It doesn't matter which one it is. I have my favorites, but I will watch them all.
Well, and the first one I really remember, and it was that, and it's one of the frequently such a subdued one in so many ways, but stoked it. And I remember seeing this one as a kid, is The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street.
Yep.
Right?
Classic.
And it's that notion of, well, we are our own worst enemy, right? It's the, humanity is, we are our biggest own problem. But it was so simple. And I think that was one of the biggest things in looking at so much of the storytelling was a lot of the stories were so simple. And as you go back and watch them, you can still get caught by the hook every time, even when you know it's coming.
The screenplay for that was in my son's English textbook when he was in high school.
Mine too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I thought that was really awesome that they're using that now as they're teaching it as classic literature. So
yeah, another one that's very similar to that, where it shows us as our own worst enemy, is The Shelter.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, yeah. That one, the end of that, when the door is just destroyed and they're all just standing there realizing what they've done, and that they'll do it again in a heartbeat, that they won't have learned anything. Oh, that one just crushes me.
So looking at that, and I mean, that's one that The Simpsons parodied so well.
The Shelter?
The Shelter, yeah. What is one of the episodes, and Kiernan, I'm going to start with you on this one. What's one of the episodes that, just going back to Len's concept of hope, right? What's one of the ones you saw that just made you feel good and hopeful with it? And I mean, because there was a lot of the episodes which, despite many of the challenges and whatnot, what's one of the ones that came out and by the time you're done, you walked away with that sense of hope?
I think the one that left me with the most hope was the last episode that they did in '64, and it was the Bewitching Pool. It's about the children who are ignored by their parents, who are almost borderline abused. And they find that when they dive into this pool, they can come out in another place where they're always happy, and there's cake and there's candy and there's other children and there's this old lady who's going to take care of them. And at the end, they dive back into that pool to find that place again. To me, that left me with hope that there is an escape from the harshness of reality.
And one of the things that I love about that episode, and that especially you found in TV at the time, was this is an old Appalachian woman
Yes.
with that deep Southern accent that had that very much. Because a lot of the time at the time, you'd have seen a character like that would have been the witch or the evil woman or something like that. She was like, "Nope, come here. We'll take care of you. It'll all be fine." All right, Misty, what's one that left you with hope?
I actually had to look up the title because I couldn't remember offhand what the title was. But mine, I'm going to say The Hunt. And it's the one where the old man has gone coon hunting with his dog. And he meets up with this guy who says, come on, this is the way to heaven right here. Take this path up to heaven. And, he realizes he's died. And so he starts to go up the path. And then the man says, well, no, dog can't come. Dog's got to stay. And he says, I'm not going anywhere without my dog. I don't care if it's heaven. I'm staying with my dog. And so they kind of go wandering down the path a little further and find another man. And he says, well, this is really the path to heaven. That was the path to the other place. And he says, can my dog come? And the guy says, absolutely, your dog can come. And your wife that you've been missing all these years, she's there too. And I'm not a heaven and hell kind of girl, but I just thought that was sweet. I liked that ending. I thought it was lovely. And it just made me happy because it showed the power of love. And because love isn't always this big passionate thing. Sometimes it's lengthy and quiet and everlasting. And so I just thought, and not just the love he had for his wife who's been gone all these years, but the love of the dog too.
And there's a great line in it when he's asking why Satan turned the dog away, and the angel says, well, a man will walk into hell with his eyes wide open. Devil can't fool a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Fraser?
Let's see. I'll go with actually an early one. Mr. Denton on Doomsday. Dan DeRea, who was a great smirking villain in a lot of old movies, plays a washed-up gunfighter. He's killed too many people. He has crawled into the bottle. He is the butt of the joke for the town bully. And then he's being slapped around and knocked down into the street as Professor Fate and his patent medicine wagon ride into town. And from our point of view, we see a gun magically appears by Mr. Denton's hand and basically lifts him up and shoots for him, knocking the gun out of the bully's hand. From the eyes of everyone who is watching, it appears Denton suddenly recovered his mojo and did the shooting himself with some gun he found. Now he has regained his self-respect. He is starting to straighten up, but then someone announces they're coming into town. They're going to slap leather with him. The cycle of killing is going to start again. But Professor Fate may have a solution. And it's one of the things Serling liked to do was give people second chances after they had lost everything. And this is an early example, and it's very appealing. And it ends on a happier note than I thought midway through it was going to.
Len?
So I decided, hey, we're talking Twilight Zone. I might as well hunt down more things. I would like to evoke the powers of the MCU and note the episode that they have cast members in common with the Twilight Zone. That being Nothing in the Dark, featuring a very young Robert Redford. It's about a very frail old woman.
Yeah.
It's snowing outside, and she is absolutely terrified that Mr. Death is trying to get in. Except she sees this police officer get shot and fall right outside her door. And the conflict becomes, if she doesn't open her door, this young police officer is going to die. And it has such peace about it at the end. It's just two people talking, but it's lovely.
Yeah, that one's very sweet.
Yeah, and one of my favorites along those lines is Kick the Can, right?
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Again, another nice, simple story, but at the end of it, it's like, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
It'll all be fine. So looking at kind of these stories, there are some definitive classics. And obviously horror and terror and dread was such a key part of so many of the episodes. Misty, for you, knowing how much you love the horror and love to be scared, what is your favorite of the ones that truly were more terrifying, more horrific, that kind of horror sort of thing?
My favorite is The Midnight Sun, which is
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
I love that one.
Damn it, you took my answer.
I'm sorry.
Same here. Same here.
Well, I have another one. I have my second
No,
favorite. You want me
please
to take that and you can
No, that's
No,
okay.
So what is it about the
Midnight
Midnight Sun?
Okay, so The Midnight Sun is about two women who they live in an apartment building, and it's very, very hot. And this is before central air and all that stuff. And so they got fans going and windows not open anymore. But you find out very quickly that the Earth has slipped its orbit and is moving closer to the sun, and is eventually going to fall into the sun and burn up. And so people are they're doing what they can. People are running north to Canada to try to get to cooler weather. Other people are dying of the heat. And these two women have chosen to stay in their apartment. And they run into a man who scares them because he stumbles in and breaks in and steals the little bit of liquid they still have left that he drinks it all and pours it over his head and it's gone, and then he freaks out because he's like, oh, what have I done? I mean, it's that kind of thing. And then you find out at the end that it was all a dream, which these days we see as a very tropey kind of thing and not good. But in this case it works because it was a fever dream. And what's really happened is the Earth has slipped its orbit, but is moving away from the sun, and it's getting very cold. And so the young woman who was in the dream the whole time being hot now looks outside and realizes it's very, very cold and it's just going to get colder. And she says, isn't the cold nice? Isn't the cold lovely? That one rattled me the first time I saw it, but I just love it. I love the whole idea of something so huge and coming at it because usually those kinds of stories are so big that you come at it from an enormous point of view, from all the government officials and the military and everybody trying to stop the disaster. But in this case, we got to see a disaster like that from a very limited viewpoint, and I really like that.
Fraser, what about you?
I will go with one of the best fifth season ones. Number 12 is Just Like You. It's a story set in a near future, similar to Scott Westerfield's Uglies many years later. When you get to a certain age, you will undergo an operation. You will become beautiful or handsome. There are like a half dozen physical types, and you will become one of them. The protagonist is a teenage girl. It is getting close to the time she has her operation. She is not enthused. She has figured out that as part of this process, you will also become much more compliant and happy, and you won't worry about the government or silly things like that. And she wants to escape, but it's not going to be an option. And then at the end, she comes in, and she's not a beauty. She wasn't a beauty, but she's a nice looking kid, and an individual kid. And at the end, she comes in looking exactly like her best friend. And, oh, Kathy, it's so wonderful. We look just alike. And you can see it has taken hold, and it's horrifying and depressing both.
Len?
So here's one in the social frontier that kind of got me a bit. Third from the Sun.
Oh,
When you have a couple of families on a military base and they've been building hydrogen bombs, and they're like, we're about to have open war and we need to get out of here. And apparently there is a spaceship that they could use, but they're going to basically have to steal it in the middle of the night, right before the war starts. And then they find out that, war's starting sooner than expected. And it's very tense. It's politically driven, but at the same time, it's like, wow. I mean, there are people knocking on doors, looking at us like, oh, what are you doing here playing cards? It's very tense. And the realization at the end is, again, a glimmer of hope, but at the same time, it doesn't absolve what they've left behind by any means. And that's why it's so scary.
Kiernan?
Yeah, I have two. One that scared me as a child and one that scares me as an adult.
Ooh.
Okay, the one that scared me as a child was The Living Doll with Telly Savalas.
Yeah.
And Talking Tina. I'm Talking Tina, and I hate you.
Mm-hmm.
That scared the bejeebus out of me as a child. It was a great episode, and I've learned to appreciate it as I've gotten older, but it really scared me when I was little. And the one that really gets me every time as an adult is The Obsolete Man.
I knew you were going to say that.
Burgess Meredith.
Mm-hmm.
The thought, it strikes a little too close to home, I think, right now, especially in this political atmosphere, that someone can be deemed obsolete because of modern technology. And actually, in the show, he was going to be destroyed because he was obsolete. He was no longer of value to society. That scares me now. That gives me the creeps now.
I will tell you, and of course I'm trying to remember because I had it and I lost it. I should remember the episode because it was the one, it always killed me, was another Burgess Meredith episode. And it's the one where the world ends and his glasses break.
Time enough
at last. Time enough at last.
At last.
And I was like, that's the one that has always killed me because I'm blind. I've always been sort of, blind. And that moment of, oh, it's quiet. Books are fine. All right. I mean, that absolutely that was one of the ones that really grabbed me. Now, one of the things with Twilight Zone, right, is, and we've kind of hinted at this, there were so many people that either, that ultimately became famous coming out of this, right? I mean, we start with Shatner, had a couple of episodes. Of course, he had the famous, Nightmare 20,000 Feet, which is a classic level that showed that Shatner always overacted, right?
Yes, it does.
But that's always been one of my favorite episodes. But who is and so Fraser, I'll start with you on this one. Who is somebody, who was one of the actors that you got to see that is a favorite actor from a favorite episode that later became a much bigger name?
I'll go with Jack Klugman, who would later be in The Odd Couple and in Quincy. And he along with Burgess Meredith, he was in 4 different episodes. They are all very good. There is In Praise of Pip, in which he's dealing with the fact that his son is dead in Vietnam. And even before his son left, he was a shitty father, and now he's regretting it. One of my favorites, and it's another Hope one, Passage for Trumpet. He is a burnout case, a trumpet player. He's lost hope in life. he dies and gets a second chance and realizes that, yeah, life is pretty damn good. Which was something that I found I mean, I still love the episode, but it was incredibly encouraging the first time I saw it, and it's a charming episode, and Klugman's terrific. Also, I mean, the hour-long episodes are not of the fourth season, are not the best work, but Death Ship, with him leading a spaceship that lands on a new planet, discovers a crashed duplicate of their ship with their bodies inside. What is going on? And as the Martinet captain, he is awesome.
All right, Len, who's your future star?
I'm going to take 2 because it's the entire cast of the episode 2.
Yes.
The cast being 2 opposing soldiers in a war that has suddenly ended, and one of them is Charles Bronson, and the other one is Elizabeth Montgomery.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't understand each other, so it's a very visual presentation. But it's immersive at the same time. I'd only seen that one a couple of times. A buddy of mine said, "No, that's my favorite episode. You have to watch it." And we watched it. I was like, wow.
The director said in an interview, Liz Montgomery was so into the part, he had to stop her from making herself grimier and messier and more miserable, because I did not recognize her until she smiled at the end. It's a great episode.
Yeah.
I've always thought that episode might have been an inspiration for Enemy Mine as well.
Oh, such a good.
Yeah.
But Kiernan, how about you?
I'm going to go with Billy Mummy from It's a Good Life.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he went on to do Lost in Space and several other things, but that's also one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, just as long as you don't stop him in an elevator and scream at him, "Wish me to the cornfield!"
Right.
He'll get real mad then.
No, but he is a nice guy. I have met him a few times. He's been fun. And that is again one of those favorite episodes, because if nobody else had gotten to it, I was getting there.
Mm-hmm.
Misty, how about you?
Well, George Takei is in a couple of episodes. Forgive me, I don't remember the titles, but and one of them is not one of my favorites, but it's a good episode. He's been hired to clean out this man's attic, and he goes up in the attic and he finds a samurai sword that the man had brought home from World War II, which means that he took it off of a dead Japanese soldier, like a lot of American soldiers did. And George Takei is, of course, the young Japanese man who is trying to make his way through the society that now doesn't entirely trust him, even though the war is over. And they get really, it's a lot of talking. It's a lot of talking. And so it's not my favorite, but he's amazing in it. And then of course you've got let's see, was it James Coburn, I think, in The Old Man in the Cave.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I love that one because he is just, he's so scary. And it's that humans are the worst kind of monsters sort of thing. Yep. Because he's the leader of the formerly military bunch who come into town pretending like they're there to help, but they really just want to loot all the supplies. And I love that he gets his just desserts in the end. But
So, Len, I'm going to come back to you on this one. So, looking at so many of Twilight Zone episodes, right, and looking at just the storytelling, what's one that has actually influenced something that you've created, some of your own work?
Ooh. Give me a minute to check the list here. Oh man, I think part of it is, I'm going to have to just go back to some of the stuff we've already mentioned, because Well, one, we have to, and two, whenever I play with social stuff, I'm just going to go to the top of my list. Whenever we go to the social stuff, my brain always defaults to the obsolete man. Like I said, we're talking about it again, but there's things about it we didn't discuss before, so that's where I'm going. Just the way the Chancellor says obsolete, and the way the Chancellor temporarily gets to survive at the end, because a lot of what I do with my work is about the human will and the resolve somebody has. Wordsworth is absolute in his resolve. He's like, I'm a librarian. You can call me obsolete if you want. I'm going to die reading a book. But there's the Chancellor, and on TV, he could stand up and be proud to, by circumstance, be stuck in a room and getting executed, but he'll die for the country, but die for the state. And he panics, and he screams out, in the name of God, let me out. Oh, in the name of God, I will let you out. Locks the door, lets him out. The room explodes. And he shows up for the next work the next morning, and he is now obsolete. Mm-hmm. And I love the message at the end with the narration too. It's basically like, what's really obsolete is those dictatorial states. They may come, but they're going to go promptly after.
I love that because I worked as a middle school librarian for a number of years. And one of the ladies that I worked with had been there forever. And she said once, never forget that we are librarians and we are the true subversives. We are the dangerous ones. And I said, why are we dangerous? And she said, because we know where the knowledge is and we share it with anybody who asks. And that makes us scary and dangerous. And I always loved that here I am in my little sweater and my little glasses being scary. But it's true, because librarians are dangerous because we are the ones who know where the learning is and will give it to you without free of charge. So yeah, I love that one.
Kiernan, how about you?
I'm gonna go with the Stop at Willoughby because of the nostalgia. I write a lot of nostalgia in my books. I love that feel of going home again, even though for him it didn't turn out too well. But I just like that feel of going home again. And then the other two that we have already kind of talked about, which was The Shelter. And The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, where we are our own worst enemies. We are the monsters, the monsters from within sort of thing.
Fraser?
I cannot say anything really influenced me, but a lot of the Twilight Zone is intrusion fantasy, which is basically the world is normal, but something strange has gotten in there. And I really enjoy writing in that vein, which is one reason I think I enjoy the Twilight Zone. So I can get something where not so much magic is a normal thing, but weird shit just happens. Like one story I did many years ago where a guy wakes up in the morning and he discovers he's a clown. Like his face is clown white. He has clown hair. All his expensive bespoke suits are now clown suits. And it does not go well for him. And he deserves it because he was a dick.
Misty?
Yeah, I haven't actually published a lot of horror. I've written some short stories. And the nice thing about the Twilight Zone is they are essentially a film short story. And short stories have different constructions than novels do. And so when you're writing a short story, there are certain goals you have to have in mind. You can't just take a point and drag it out for a long time because you just don't have time. And so I learned a lot about how short stories had to happen from watching Twilight Zone episodes and seeing how compact and concise that they were, yet rich and full. at the same time. So I think that it taught me a lot about how to write short stories.
Yeah, and actually, when I've done workshops and things like that, frequently I'll tell people to watch the Twilight Zone, listen to old radio shows, and look at how tight the dialogue is, how much story is set in so few words. So, since we're playing with that theory, right, Kiernan,
Yes.
I'm going to come to you on this. Obviously, as writers, we all have told our story of the tortured writer because, well, that's part of it, right? At some point, you have to do your story of the tortured writer. Which one of Serling's tortured writers from media and everything else, all the ones that he played with, do you have a favorite?
Oh my gosh. That is such a hard one. You're gonna need to come back to me. I gotta think about that.
All right, Fraser?
I'll go. Okay, the guy's not exactly tortured, but he is a writer. Let me just take a quick check of the.
Nobody ever said I
Oh yeah, A
played
World
fair.
of His Own, first season ender. A man, he's able to whatever he write. He's a writer. Whatever he puts into his dictaphone becomes reality.
Yeah.
So he has a fabulous wife, fabulous house. By throwing away the dictaphone tape, he can also destroy it. And at the end of the episode, after Serling is trying to reestablish his control, he's, oh no, Rod, we're not going to undo this. And he throws the tape in the fire and Serling disappears. And then the guy gets back with his hot wife. So not terribly tortured, but fun.
Yeah, the ones where they broke the fourth wall periodically were always fun.
Yeah.
Misty?
That was actually the one I was going to mention too, because I love how when he gets it, when he does something and then he decides he doesn't like it anymore, he just snips out a little bit of the tape and tosses it in the fire. And it's like, okay, well, that was kind of harsh, but yeah, that was the one that occurred to me too.
Len?
Yeah, I'm the same way. That was me as well. That was the one I was trying to think of, and it's the most writerly, I think, of the episodes, in my opinion.
There's some good media ones, but yeah.
I mean that's just the one that draws on me the most, as far as what I think when it's like Twilight Zone and writer, and it's full of whimsy. I mean, especially the little outro bit at the end, and the way Rod Serling just kind of like shrugs, was like, oh well, before he's snuffed out of existence.
All right, Kiernan, did you come up with anything you want to add?
I did. I came up with one, The Printer's Devil, where you've got the reporter who wants a story so badly that he makes a deal with the devil without knowing it, to get his big stories, and then these crazy things keep getting printed and they start actually happening in reality. I think Burgess Meredith was also in that one. I think that shows the folly of chasing that perfect story constantly, without putting the effort in.
So I'm going to kind of go along that same line because, again, this is one of those favorite topics, because frequently the storyline was all about that of good and evil, God and the devil, especially the, when are you in hell? And there was one, I am trying to remember the name of it, but it's the gambler who gets stuck, and every time, he can't lose, right?
Yes,
And fundamentally he's like, but if this is heaven, and he says, oh, whoever said this was heaven.
Whoever.
Mr. French is the angel.
Mr. French, yes, thank you.
That's it.
I was
That's
sitting
the
here
one.
I was sitting here scrolling, looking back for that. So Fraser, do you have a favorite one that's in that God and the devil sort of timeline, or sort of line that?
Yeah, well, Passage for Trumpet does have an appearance by Gabriel the Angel. The Howling Man does have the devil. Off the top of my head, I cannot think of any others that are like heaven and hell issue. I mean, I can think of others, but not that I would list as a favorite.
Misty?
Yeah, I'm looking to see if I can even remember. Um, yeah, skip me because I can't think of. I think I've covered the ones with the devil, like the one with the man and his dog. So
Yeah, that one very much.
Len, anyone to add in there?
Um, I'm very much with the. I mean, it's never so much the big D devil as so much as it is the deeper levels of good and evil. He might deal more with heavenly forces, but not as often with specifically infernal ones. The closest to that kind of thought I can think of that jumps out to me, and I'm just blanking on the name, but surely someone will help me. There's one where an older gentleman has four heirs, and they are just
The Mask.
thank
Yeah.
you, and it's just he's like, I give you this mask, and I give you this mask because of that. And he's calling them on their shit.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, they get to wear them. They really get to wear them.
whatever.
I have one I would like to contribute. It's not God, but it's Santa, Night of the Meek.
Night of the Meek.
Art Carney, this one I watch every Christmas. He is a drunk. Every year he plays Santa at a local department store. This time he poured into a bottle because he lives in a tenement and everyone around him is so miserable. And so he gets fired. And then he discovers this sack full of stuff. And he discovers that whatever somebody wants for a present, he can pull it out of the sack. And it goes on from there. And it is charming. And I like the fact that even the Scrooge-ish department store owner winds up with a reasonably Merry Christmas. It's a very warm-hearted episode.
It is.
Yeah.
Kiernan?
My choice is really not heaven and not heaven and hell, but Mr. Death, and that's One for the Angels.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
About the pitchman that sidewalk salesman that says, I don't want to die, not until I make a pitch for the angels. And then this little girl is hit by a car, and in order to save her life, he puts on the pitch for the angels to hold off death until after midnight so the little girl can live. And of course, he dies at the end. But I think that would be my choice.
Another good classic.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of my favorite episodes, and it's another one of the ones that was very subtle, is Ray Bradbury, the one Ray Bradbury wrote, I Sing the Body Electric.
Yes.
Where it is, you've got the android coming in to be the nanny. And so you wind up getting the story of the future as seen from that late 50s, early 60s perspective of, I'm still waiting on my flying car, but that's a different rant. I also want my jetpack. I'm still waiting. So while not as many of these handled, kind of the future tech, there were still a lot of them that were very futurist episodes. So Fraser, is there one for you that brought up some of the futurist kind of stuff? What are you looking for? What are you waiting on? What's one of the episodes you look at and you go, yeah, I'm still waiting on my X?
Well, they had several that dealt with space flight, and obviously we never got to Mars, and the space program is slower. Strangely enough, the one that sticks in my mind from before anyone had gone out into space is I shot an arrow into the air in which we put men in space for the first time, and it breaches some kind of cosmic law. So the day after they get back, suddenly one of the three men is gone. and he never existed, and nobody but the other two astronauts remembers him. And then the second astronaut disappears, and nobody remembers him. And finally, the third astronaut is gone, and the spaceflight never happened. And just the sheer unexplained weirdness of it has always captivated me.
And well timed there, Fraser, to
Yes.
disappear as well. Misty, what about you?
I like the one, forgive me, I don't remember the title offhand, but it's the one about Corey. He's a prisoner and he's been put on Mars. Yeah, I think it's Mars. He's put on Mars in solitary confinement, essentially, and he's got a shack and he's got books, and there's a supply ship that comes every so often that brings him food and stuff to do, but he essentially lives alone on this planet all by himself because of the crimes that he committed. And along the way, the supply ship commander, who is actually a really nice guy, brings him a box and says, "Here, open this after we're gone. It might help you feel better." And he opens it up, and it's a robot in the shape of a beautiful woman. And so at first he's like, "I don't want this robot. This is not for me." But then he eventually comes to accept her and then love her. So, and the problem is that when his pardon finally comes in, the supply ship shows up and says, "Look, we're here to get you. This is going to be the last trip. We're not coming back to Mars after this, so you got to get on the flight with us right now." And he says, "Great, let me go get Alicia and we'll get on the ship with you." And they say, "Wait, no, just you. We don't have the room for her too." And he's fighting with the commander, and the commander finally shoots her in the face to show that she's just a piece of machinery. And it's so sad.
It's the lonely.
Yeah, it's the lonely. Yeah, it's really good.
Len, how about you?
Oh, I'm trying to dig for the name of it. Again, it's just me wanting space travel because it's another one where you have a woman all by herself, middle of nowhere, and you get these tiny, minuscule little astronauts, spacemen coming out, and
it's with Agnes Moorehead.
Yeah, it's Agnes Moorehead.
Mm-hmm.
And Dora.
She's got this. Eventually, you see this saucer on the on the side of her house, and it's USAF. So these tiny little things, that's us.
It's the invaders.
Thank you. That is it. Yes.
It's so good.
Yes, and she doesn't speak a word in the entire
a word.
show.
There's a story when she looked at the script, she flipped it over, and I don't have any lines. I thought you said it was a leading role. I don't know about this.
And she brings it home.
Yeah.
Brings it home.
Kiernan, how about you? What's your future one?
Going along the lines of space travel again, I think mine was, I think it's the one that's called People Are Alike All Over.
Oh, yeah.
It's with Roddy McDowell, and the astronauts go into space, and they're all haughty and oh, look what we did, and they end up being in the zoo because people are alike all over. I think that would be my favorite, like, space kind of episode.
So, Misty, I'm gonna go to you on this one, right? So, just looking back, if somebody is like, I've never, that's an old show, that's ancient. I've never seen the Twilight Zone. I don't know how that person could exist, but I'm sure some of these whippersnappers get off my lawn. Some of them there have never seen the classic Twilight Zones. What's one that you would look and say, nope, you need to see this story?
Definitely the Anthony and the Cornfield. Remind me?
A Good Life.
Good
Life.
A Good Life.
Yeah, and that one, because it's classic for one thing, and it's well known, and so it might be, even if they haven't seen the Twilight Zone, it might be familiar because of pop culture references, and so they could just slide right in. But it's also got that Twilight Zone chill at the end that was so necessary to so many of their most successful shows. I think that would be my choice to intro somebody.
Len?
Eye of the Beholder. That's just it's just this quiet scene of all of these medical professionals. They are trying to fix this poor woman's face, and because she's been so horribly deformed, and then once they open up the bandages, it's like, wait, why is she? Oh, she's a really pretty blonde lady. It must have worked. And they're like, no change at all. It's a complete failure. And then you find out everybody's got big
faces
outs like this, and twisted face this direction or twisted face that direction. It's like, wow.
Kiernan, what you got?
I'm going to say Time Enough at Last. I think that's also a classic episode. It's one that most people know. It's got that twist at the end that I think even today we can kind of relate to. What do you do? What would you do if you couldn't see and there was nothing else to do? What would you do with yourself? That would be my pick.
So I'm going to throw one last question out there.
Well, we didn't get Fraser's.
Oh, Fraser. I'm sorry, Fraser.
That's okay. Going to depend on who I'm showing it to. My wife, I showed her Time Enough at Last. My best friend who does not like horror, it'll be something like Mr. Denton on Doomsday, or one of the others that has a sweet and happy, hopeful ending. So it's going to depend on my target audience, if you will.
So I want to throw one last one out there, and this is always that fun question. It's not about the episode, but it is about that closing twist. And whoever wants this one first can dive on it. What's the one twist that still grabs you every time you see it?
Oh,
I'll go. The one in 16mm Shrine, where it's the woman of a certain age. She was a successful actor in her youth, and she was on film with all of the famous people. But now she is a woman of a certain age, and she's expected to just live out her life in her mansion and be quiet. And she can't let go of her youth. And so at the end, she ends up finding a way to go into the film that she watches every day, her old films. She goes into the film, and when her producer or agent or whoever he is shows up, and he's like, he sees her in the film as it's ending, and he says, Barbie, come back. And she turns and she looks at him, and she throws her scarf and she walks off camera. And I love that.
I'll go next. Trouble with Templeton. Templeton is an aging actor. His wife is dead. He has been sleepwalking through life ever since. He gets taken back to the days when they were both young and married and happy, and he discovers his wife is a lush. She's a shrill, obnoxious gold digger. She is probably banging his best friend. He flees back to the present, snapped out of his sleepwalking, and then he discovers he has a script, and it includes everything that has just happened. And he realized the whole thing was staged so that this is her way of telling him, I'm dead, you're alive, live. And he finally remembers to do that. And it is a wonderful twist and a very moving episode.
I got one for you. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. You go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I can't remember the title of the episode, but it is the one where the girl keeps seeing the flight number, except she doesn't know it's a flight number, and she keeps having this nightmare where she's going down to the morgue.
Room for one more, honey.
Room for one more.
Oh, yeah. That's it.
At the end, it turns out to be the flight number that she's supposed to get on, and she doesn't get on. And you can see the plane blow up in the background.
Mm-hmm.
That still gives me like chills.
For me, will the real Martian please stand up?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Bunch of people in a diner in the middle of the night. It's like, wait, was that a flying object out there? And they realize, wait, there's one too many people in here. Somebody hears not what they say. Only at the end you find out, yeah, that's true. But it's not the Martians who are coming. It's the Venusians.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There's actually an episode of Murder, She Wrote that is clearly inspired by that episode of the Twilight Zone. So I saw it just the other day. It was like, wait a minute, is there a Martian in this?
Yeah.
No, just a murderer.
Yep. Well, and I think it's one of those things is Twilight Zone. You can see directly how many of these scripts have inspired, and sometimes calling it inspired is being really generous, but inspired so much of our modern storytelling in the films we see. I do have to throw one of my other favorites on here, even though it's another one of those that was really kind of simple, but a most unusual camera. Was still one of my ridiculous little favorites with, let's keep the hustling. Let's keep the hustling going. Camera captures that a most immediate future. How's that? That would never happen. That's still one that you can watch it coming the entire way, and yet every time it's a fun little end. Well, before y'all take a step through the doorway, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys. Website, social media, and of course, what they need to pick up in your own little twisted corner of the Twilight Zone. So, Len, you're up first.
Len-Berry.com is my website. I'm on a bunch of social medias. Most recent book is Loyalty of Severus, epic science fiction. No crazy weird twist at the end, unfortunately, but there's more books to come.
Kiernan?
You can find me at KiernanKellyBooks.com or DakotaChaseBooks.com. My usual forte are romance novels, but I do write horror. So since this is a Twilight Zone, I would recommend my horror short story called The Hole, which can be picked up on Amazon. It's also on KU.
Fraser?
You can find me at FraserSherman.com, Fraser. All my books are listed there as well as on Amazon. I will have Southern Discomfort, a historical intrusion fantasy set in 1973 with elves in Georgia, coming out sometime in the next 2 or 3 months.
And Misty?
You can find me at MistyMassey.com. I'm on Facebook and Blue Sky and TikTok. So if you want to come see what I'm doing with social media, that's where you can find me. I'm also a cast member for the Authors and Dragons podcast of actual play D&D adventures. We play it to its absolute silliest levels, so come and give us a listen.
And you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, creatingpros.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we will see you again soon. Or will we?
Fraser needs to disappear now. Just leave.